All right, hi everyone. Today we've got a bit of a thought exercise. This is relating to some health science stuff. If you know me, you know that I bump into really weird medical conditions on account of a few genetic quirks and seemingly unknown responses to like pathogens. I've had some weird responses to COVID, and I have some nerve issues like relating to neuralgia. But recently I've had a weird thing pop up that is not significant in like a concerning way, but it is something that I've noticed a few other people online have had, and no one seems to have an obvious answer. And it makes it like an interesting thing for a thought experiment. So this is like a visual anomaly, specifically a blue square in the vision of one eye, offset from the center, so lower and like slightly to the left and angled. So imagine like a little blue square that's kind of angled toward the center, but it's offset. And it looks exactly like if you look at a light and then you look away and you have the little ghost of the light there, except it appears without any light source and it just sits there constantly. Now, as a medical thought experiment, there are many reasons why there may be a visual anomaly, and your mind may go to like some particularly obvious ones, which are probably some good places to start. Maybe you have some experience in the realm of migraine, visual migraine, aura, of which I am very familiar. Migraine is one of my fields of like self-assigned expertise. Can you think of anything else? You know, like retinal damage, maybe burning. Maybe we were looking at the sun and what we're seeing is some kind of imprint from a burn, damage on the retina, maybe some kind of other degeneration, some kind of nerve degeneration, diabetic retinopathy. What could possibly cause something like that, like a constant blue square in the vision? Well, I'll add some extra details. So whenever I encounter a mystery problem, I always pay attention to the behavior of the problem, whatever it is, because I feel like the behavior, regardless of the specific symptom, can tell you a lot. So for example, I noticed certain patterns in previous issues, like with my subjective dyspnea, I know that its final mechanism is nerve-based, regardless of it being like a histamine overload, a mast cell degranulation, immune response to milk protein, etc. The actual final reason for there being a sense of breathlessness is a vagus nerve issue, and I know that in part because it does this fluctuation thing throughout the day, which I also noticed during my corneal neuralgia last year. This is a breathlessness, that's a pain, but they do this weird, almost sine wave fluctuation throughout the day. So I've noticed that, in particular, when I have nerve-based issues, they have this natural cadence to them. Similarly, spasms have a certain cadence of their own, like fast onset, linger, sometimes slow offset, but this fast onset is like a particular indicator for like a spasm, sudden, extend, drop off. So even without knowing what the particular cause is, whenever there's a mystery symptom of some kind, I always look at the behavior on like a chronological perspective. Is there an onset on a curve and an offset on a curve? Is it predictable? Is it sudden? Like what's the drop off? It's not always a valuable clue, but it does give you some indications. Next up is like the persistence or the growth. Is it stable, the symptom, whatever it is, or does it evolve into other things? Does it change over time? In general, is it transient episode or is it constant? So when talking about this eye problem, the blue square, it's a mystery condition. And I say that as not just for me, but when I've seen other people report it when they've gone to doctors. Whenever they've got tests, they seem to come back clear. And a lot of the time, there's no real cause for concern, although there has been one person that reported seeing blue dots that ended up having some kind of brain tumor. So there seems to be like a lot of overlap between things. So with that context in mind, let's add a few more details. This blue square in my vision first appeared one evening, lasted for several hours, and disappeared after I went to sleep and woke up the next morning. And then it was not seen for weeks. So that was a transient episode. A couple of days ago, it reappeared after waking up in the morning and disappeared after sleeping that night. So it was there the whole day. So again, another transient episode, but only lasting one day. So not constant. So does that mean it's something that's cause for concern? Maybe, because something that's transient may be an early warning sign for something, especially since the first time it appeared, it only lasted a few hours and started in an evening, and the next time it lasted an entire day. Okay, maybe, but let's talk about the actual manifestation. In both of those episodes, the manifestation was identical, the same square in the same place, meaning that it wasn't worse in the next episode, even though the next episode lasted longer. It was identical, so the same thing manifesting. So on a personal level, I would not consider it concerning unless it had changed in some way, unless that square had grown or some other symptom had come along at the same time, indicating a progression of some kind, which may still happen in the future. By the way, as we talk about this, I don't actually know what the cause is. I have suspicions, and that's part of this full exercise. You will learn how I think about things. And again, it may evolve in the future, but I'll tell you how I come to my theory. Okay, next up, is it mechanical or is it neurological? That's a bit of a misnomer, I suppose, because neurological things are mechanical issues, but just categorically speaking, is it a direct issue with the eye or is it a illusion of neurological perception? Now that's quite a difficult one to filter out without observation. So if it was a mechanical issue with the eye, you might be able to see it on a test, but what kind of test? So here's some additional context. In 2023, I had quite a thorough brain scan and it showed no abnormality in terms of brain tumors. Now it is 2025, a brain tumor could have appeared in that mid-time, but probably not. Things can appear quickly, but brain tumors that produce issues tend to appear slowly. Then again, I'm not an expert on that. There is precedent for brain tumors in my family. My nan passed away from complications relating to one a couple of years ago. But like I said, a couple of years ago again, I had a brain scan and nothing appeared. Similarly, only a few weeks ago, I had an OCT scan, so just like a retinal scan. Only a simple one though, as there are more advanced ones which can be done. For example, there are just images of the retina, and then you have like the kind of surface topography where you can see like the valleys and any abnormalities in the surface from like a cross-section perspective. So basic retinal imagery showed no abnormality, but there is more work that could have been done. So we have like two kind of clear indications there, neurologically and in terms of a basic look of the retina. Okay, so we'll just say that there's no like critical concern in those two areas. So what does that point to? It points more to a neurological cause, but I'm not convinced about that. So let's delve into that a little bit more. The reason why I wouldn't be convinced is, again, thinking about patterns and behaviors of previous issues. I have a lot of experience with different types of migraine. Now that does lead to an indication of like a migraine related cause, because many visual issues have direct connections. If you're doing like research in a population of people that suffer from migraines, far more likely to experience like random visual anomalies. So what I would do now is recall my memory of things that I have confirmed as neurological and think about their behaviors and see if they match up with this. So when I've had like ocular migraines in the past when I was younger, there'd be things like blind spots, which appear and grow and move across the vision. I don't have exactly the same aura manifestations as other people that recall like lightning strikes and flashes. I don't think I've experienced flashes, but for me it was mostly blind spots. But it's not exactly what they were that's important, it's the transient nature of them. They changed over time. And oftentimes the change could be experienced live. For example, when I've had hemiplegic migraines as well, so when I lose like control over half the body and I can feel a pins and needles sensation, I could track the change of the pins and needles as they moved across my body, whether it was down the hand, up the arm, across the face, etc. And the actual blind spots, as I blinked, they would change. And as I watched something, I could see them move across the vision. There was constant change. That doesn't necessarily mean that every neurological thing will have a constant state of change. But again, when assessing behaviors and making comparisons, we're making deductions based on experience. So another example, just to add some more to the data set, would be the vestibular migraines. They're extremely long lasting in terms of like 12 to 24 to 48 hours compared to people that have something like just a few minutes, which is weird to me. How lucky is that? But there is still a constant state of change. Like my eyes would constantly drift to one side, but over a long period of time, multiple hours, the amount of the drift would slowly reduce, even though there's a hypersensitivity that remained. So it raises the question, if we know that in neurological situations, there is a somewhat constant change over time, was there any change with this visual problem? The answer is no and yes. So it depends on what aspect we're looking at. In terms of the actual square, when it kept appearing throughout the day, it would appear and disappear, and I'll tell you the exact pattern in a minute. But when it appeared, it was still the constant square. However, the temporal pattern did slightly change. When it appeared for longer amounts of time closer to the beginning of the day and a shorter amount of time closer to the end of the day. So if you think about it in a phasic way of it appearing and disappearing, longer at the beginning, shorter at the end. With one exception, there was quite a longer phase near the end after an eye compress, like a microwave warm compress over the eyes, which may also be a clue. if not incidental. Now, an important part about this is the pattern of the appearance. When it appeared throughout the day, it would appear suddenly, like a spike, maintained for an extended period of time, and then sort of phase off, where sometimes when I blink, it would be there, and sometimes it wouldn't. Now, if we remember earlier on in this video, that pattern, spike, extend, and reduce over time, that is a spasmic pattern, like a muscle spasm. Sudden, maintain, and then fade off. So that's how I think about things when I'm doing comparisons to older issues. A spasm in terms of a pattern, and a half, like a 50% chance of being a neurological element because there was some kind of temporal change over time, but only in terms of its appearance and not its manifestation. So because it's only a half effect in that way, where only the timing changed, that's why I would consider it to be only partially neurological. If the actual shape of the square had changed over time in accordance with the change in its appearance over time, then I would consider it fully neurological and fully migrainous. Does that make sense? But because the square didn't change, kind of makes it feel like maybe there's a neurological component, but it's just highlighting something mechanical when it's appearing, if that makes sense. So even without any intricate knowledge on the inner workings of the eye, which is something I still need to learn about because it's one of my kind of blind spots, if you pardon the pun, in terms of my education, I will learn about it more in the future because obviously I'm going into that field of things. So what does that leave us with? We're looking for something that's likely a combination of neurological and a mechanical action, and we're looking for a spasmic behavior. So the clue of a spasm helps us narrow things down. What spasms in the body? Well, muscles spasm, but also blood vessels can spasm. And if we're thinking about the eye, and we're thinking about the retina in particular, there's a question: can blood vessels in the retina spasm? And if so, what kind of effects does that produce? And it turns out that yes, retinal blood vessels can spasm, and that can be an indication of more serious problems, but the manifestation of this symptom is not that serious, because a lot of people that have serious spasms of the blood vessels get blindness in the eye. However, retinal vasospasming, as it's called, can be associated with migraine. Now, the interesting thing is that my other migraines are typically not associated with blood constriction, blood vessel spasming, dilation, whatever, even though a lot of people think they are. And I've done tests with that because I can trigger vestibular migraines on command if very specific conditions are met. In terms of neural adaptation for vestibular issues, PPBD, not all of my migraines are blood vessel related. But if this transient blue square is a combination of a retinal vasospasm described as a migraine event, then it may be a blood vessel related migraine that appears randomly every now and again and is reset by sleep. So what's a risk factor for these types of blood vessel spasms? Well, systemic diseases, Raynaud's phenomenon, SLE, I'm just doing a little bit of research. The hypertension, I do have raised blood pressure, so that's another potential reason. Migraine, so of course, like I said, people with a history of migraine may experience these things. But I've also seen reports of people online that say that when their blood pressure drops, they experience this, or when they've had alcohol, they experience it, or when they don't get enough sleep. And all of those are very generalized things that can have multiple different effects on the body. Again, people with diabetes have noticed similar things. Blood sugar increases and decreases can have multiple generalized effects. If we're talking about migraine, these are all definitely things that can increase the risk of migraine occurring, but it may not be strictly migraine related. So what can I do about this? If this occurs more frequently, is this something I should get investigated? Yes, if it occurs more frequently, but there are things I can do from home. For example, if blood pressure is the concern, which I know that I have a risk for, and migraine, of course, well, there are things I can do about blood pressure. I can stop my caffeine intake, I can lower my sodium intake, but also, more effectively, Candesartan, that I don't actually have for blood pressure, even though it is used for that. I spoke to my doctor about trialing this for migraine prevention, but I don't actually take it as often as I'm supposed to. Basically, the interesting thing here is that I might be experiencing a transient, faint warning sign about blood pressure, of which I already have the solution for right next to me. That, by the way, is a calcium channel blocker that helps to reduce blood pressure. That's only a low dose one though. The point of this video is I'm teaching you to think like I do when mystery symptoms appear that doctors typically don't have answers for. Identify the patterns in time and actual manifestation in your previous issues. Are they mechanical? Are they neurological? When you encounter something new, is there a pattern to it? Is it constant? Does the pattern match something from the past? What changes it in your day-to-day activities? Even without having the input of a doctor, you may be able to narrow down the location and the type of action. What type of tissue is it? In this case, is it blood related? Is it muscle? Is it a chemical signal of some kind? Here, I've decided that it's a combination of two things. It's migrainous in which case it may be a neurological signal issue, but is also possibly a vasospasm, like a blood vessel spasm of some kind. And given the consistency of the square, it leads me to believe that maybe there is a very specific part of a blood network, like a capillary network in the retina, that maybe when a spasm occurs has a slight reduction in the kind of oxygen provision to nearby nerves. So maybe there's a little kink there, and that kink is the square being represented in the vision. And then maybe it's not an issue for the rest of the capillary network, but maybe there's just one particular abnormal area. And apparently these vessels can kind of rearrange themselves over time anyway, but that's my deduction there, that we have a combination of a neurological event and one anomalous mechanical area that's not visually seen as a problem on retinal imagery, but is just presenting an anomaly during those events. Maybe I'm wrong, but the point here is we're learning to think like a detective without even having the expert knowledge yet. And when the expert knowledge comes along, we will then be able to reassess that and then optimize the cause to like the perfect correct answer. Anyway, that's where we'll leave it for this full exercise. Maybe it's taught you something, maybe it hasn't. But if you made it this far, please put an eye-related emoji in the comments so I can see if you made it this far. Remember, you can sign up to my Patreon, patreon.com/CurtisHolt, to support all my different projects and my education, because I'll be learning more about medical science in the future. Otherwise, check out my products on curtisholt.online/store if you're more into the Blender side of things. Otherwise, have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time.